Baruchim Aboim B'Shem Irgin Torah. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi mistreated on issur Rechilus halachic. To have the great source sponsoring a shir, call Irgin Torah at 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rav Smith.
We recently heard a very sensitive question where someone was told information in confidence, not tell anybody, and then he was basically asked to disclose that information. Whatever the context was, but the question is when you know information in confidence that was told not to repeat, and now there's a teshuva to disclose that, is there any heter to disclose information that really should be confidential? Or, I guess a more common shaila, someone asks you point blank, what did he say about me? I know he's talking about me, I want to know what did he say about me? Or you're giving someone musa, and it comes out, why are you giving him musa? Because someone told you that he did something wrong. So by doing the mitzvah of musa, you're saying basically that someone told me that you did something wrong. So if you notice, today's sugya is basically touching upon a sometimes unexplored sugya, and that's really the issur of Rechilus. Now, Baruch Hashem, we live in a dor, we could say achsha dor, there's a heightened awareness of the issur of loshonhora. People are learning and knowing hilchos loshonhora. But if you'd ask the average person, tell me, what exactly is the issur of Rechilus? Is it like loshonhora? Is it different? There's a heter of loshonhora l'tochacha. Is there a heter of Rechilus l'tochacha? Now, what's interesting is that the Chofetz Chaim devoted half his sefer, chelik beis as he calls it, is all about hilchos Rechilus. The pasuk, the issur of loshonhora, the word loshonhora you will not find in the Torah. The Torah used the term leiselach rachel ba'mecha. So obviously Rechilus is equal to the issur of loshonhora. So what exactly is the issur of Rechilus? When does it apply? What are the parameters of it? So that's our agenda for today, and I think if we clarify what Rechilus is, we'll know when it applies and when it doesn't. So as we know, the makar of the issur of Rechilus is the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim, leiselach rachel ba'mecha. Now, right away, you're a little surprised what that means. Rachel is a peddler. What's a peddler have to do with talking? But what's even more unusual, the next words are loisamoid al dam reyecha. There's not even a vav that connects the two. But it sounds like it's one hemshech, loiselech and loisamoid. What is this loiselech rachel ba'mecha? So Rashi has quite an arichas, but he points out that a rachel is a peddler. He takes items and he has to vakoifen. So Rashi says that's Rechilus. And Rashi uses an interesting term. You go to your friend's house, you see what's doing, and what you could pass on. So basically, a Rachel is a peddler who's giving over loshonhora. And Rashi proves that in Chaf and Gimel are sometimes interchangeable. So Rachel is like Rogil. Rogil is a spy, like the Meraglim. So just like a Rogil goes to find out was tutzach bayanim, and of course he shares the information, a Rachel is someone that knows something, finds out something, and wants to share with others. You know, if you think about it, that's really the big Yetzirah of a Rachel. That's the churban of a Rachel. You know, some people are very special and important and they're well liked, but some people don't have what to offer. You know what they do? They find out the latest schmutz, pardon me, and they go over, do you know what I know? And suddenly the world stops and everybody wants to hear what they have to say. He's now possessing the most important information, the latest narishkeit, the latest mud, the latest schmutz. You know, being a Rachel, being about loshonhora is a quick high. You become the most important thing. You know, you go and you say, oh, you know what's going on, you know, the latest tumult. Unfortunately, people have a heter for this. But that's really, that exposes the lowliness of a Rachel. He's a peddler of shmutz, of loshonhora, that's maxriv esa'ila. Rechilus Rachel, Megala Side, the pasuk in Mishnah Yud Aleph Yud Gimel says, that someone that's Megala Soidis, he has a labas vakoifen, and people are very, wow, he's special, he's important. He's a nobody, but he's selling the shmutz. But the Rambam in Hilchos Deis, Perek Zayin Halacha Aleph, puts things in perspective. Hameragel b'chaveri oiva b'laisase shenem b'leseil rachel b'amecha. And even though there's no malchus, because there's a dibur, avayin gadolhu v'horig v'goyim laharig nefashes rabbis b'Yisrael. Or ridiculous. He causes many retzichas. And then the Rambam says something that seems to be cryptic, and we'll soon explain. Lekach nismoich leisamer adam riecha. A Rechil has a shaychus to a Reitzeach. That's the smichus. And the Rambam then adds, Seyulumad ma'ira l'doyeg ha'doimi. You want to know what I'm talking about? Go learn the story of Doyeg. So the Rambam at Gehesu, we have to learn the story, The story of Doyeg ha'doimi, or better yet, the tragedy, the churban of Doyeg ha'doimi is in Shmuel Aleph, Perek Chav Aleph, and Perek Chav Beis. Doyeg ha'doimi, the pasuk describes that Abir Haroyim, he was the Reish Bezdin, was the Doyeg Hadar. And yet, we learned the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, Doyeg ha'doimi ended up being one of those hedyotis that has no cheg olam haba. How did a person go mi'igar rama labir amik the Reish Bezdin to en lechad haba? So the story is told in Shmuel Aleph, Perek Chaf Aleph, when David HaMelech was running away from Shaul. We don't understand these things, but Shaul, Bechir Hashem, wanted to kill David. And David found refuge in Noiv Yer Kahanim. Achimelech treated him wonderfully. And because he didn't know that there was this war going on between David and Shaul. Doyeg knew what was going on. And Doyeg wanted to curry favor by Shaul, like he cares for Shaul, and he told Shaul, do you know what Achimelech, you know what the Kahanim did? They took care of your enemy, David HaMelech. So Shaul was upset. How could anybody do that? And he called Achimelech. What happened? At that time, Achimelech was clueless. He had no idea. He says, I took care of the king's son, the son-in-law. Aren't you happy? And of course, Shaul wasn't happy. And before long, Shaul had the whole city, Noiv Yer Kahanim, executed. They took care of David. He killed the whole city of Kahanim, Nefashit, and the way the pasuk describes it is pathetic. The Noiv Yer Kahanim hahikal leficharav meish vad isha me'oil vad yoinik shor v'chamar sel leficharav. It sounds like you're annihilating lahavdil Amalek. And Shaul had this done because of Doyeg's Rechilus. Because Doyeg told the information, which was true, and as the poskim point out, Achimelech thought he did nothing wrong. He was proud of it. But this bit of information brought out a sinner, that brought out a machlokes, that brought out a churban of Machriv, a whole city of Klal Yisrael. That's the churban of Rechilus. You tell someone information, even if it was done was good, but if it's going to bring to machlokes or sinner, that's terrible. And then the Rambam in Halacha Beis spells out Ezu Rachel. He takes information, gives it to someone else. People applying the loshon of the Rambam, he's machriv ha'olam. No, we saw that. Doiv and Yer Kahanim was machriv ha'olam. The Shari Teshuva, the Bein Yoyin, in Gimel Reish Chav Beis, he speaks about this issur, about the story of Doyeg, and he explains the foundation of the world is Shalom, and Rechilus shakes the foundation of the world. He quotes the Yerushalmi that says that Rechilus kills 3 parties. And of course the mashal is obvious. The one that said Rechilus was Doyeg. He became someone that knew Olam Haba. Shaul that accepted the Rechilus had a terrible Misa Meshuna. Terrible Saif. And those that was said about, Noiv Yer Kahanim, were killed out. So the Bein Yoyin says, it's mar b'sina and brings a person to the worst averis, and that's the evil of Rechilus. So now we understand what the Rambam means. Rechilus, although it might seem innocent, I'm just passing on information, brings Retzicha. And that's why the simple pshat is because if you're not careful, adam And if you look in the Chizkuni, one of the Rishonim on the Chumash, he even says more than that in the Rambam. And he says, why didn't the pasuk put a vav so it's like 2 different points? Teretz, it's not 2 different points, it's 1 point. If you're not nizir in Rechilus, you're going to end up ritzicha. Leiselach and leisamayid is 1. If you say the wrong information, it can bring you the ritzicha rachmanu litzlan. So this is really the yisoid of Rechilus. And if I maybe to put it a little more bluntly, this is the difference loshonhora and Rechilus. Loshonhora, as the Rambam describes, is dibur hamazik. The Rambam in Hilchos Deis, Perik Zayin, halacha hey, he says that the issur of loshonhora is dibur hamazik. And the Rambam says also it's gnus, bechefze, it's bad words. Rechilus is not necessarily bad words. What Achimelech did was a mitzvah of chesed to David, and he was proud of it. But it's the outcome, it's the tochacha. It's words that might be nice, something done nicely, but it's maxriv esa'ila. I'll give you a mashal. And again, people don't even realize how damaging it is. You could have people get married a few months later, they say, oh, by the way, when I asked information about you, I asked your friend, and he told me things, I was shocked. But I'm so happy I didn't listen to you. I'm so happy I married you. Very nice. What did you say? That your friend told you bad information. Why don't you think before you talk? You want to be the nice guy? Fine, you married him. Nice. Why do you say that? So again, it's something that's innocently said, but without thinking. That's the churban of it. Of course, we don't need more than what the Mishnah says in Avos Beis Yud Aleph. Sinas habrias is ma'itziras adam in ha'olam. And that's what Rechilus does. Whether it's bad kavana or good kavana, it brings machlaikis. And the emphasis is, we see too often what Rechilus, a wrong statement, does. I want to share with you what I saw. And to me, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this. This happened a number of years ago, but the churban is still going on. And this is a true story. I'm going to just leave out some of the details, but it's mamish, this advarim kaviyosem. There was someone who called him Sheini Yid, that had, his best friend was a big gevir. The gevir did everything for this Sheini Yid. He supported him and his children. It was mamish, the prototype, Shevas Achim Gam Yachad. Mamish. This gevir got involved with a certain project, the chesed project, and he invested heavily. And the Sheini Yid thought he was wasting his time. It wasn't a good idea. So the Sheini Yid told a common friend of theirs, I don't know what he got himself into. It's not going to work. That was the extent of it. The person that heard this, without seichel, went back to the gevir. Even your good friend says, you're embarking in a losing proposition. And the gevir mamish lost himself. He got mamish out of control. My best friend, I do so much for him. That's what he does behind my back. And this started what I describe as lahashmin ulaharik, or achas dosai. I don't know which, maybe both are true. But this going adayim hazeh, and it mamish destroyed both of them. I don't want to get into details, but both of them suffered obvious losses because they were in such a war. Achil Hashem. I don't want to get into the details. But this is maxriv esa'olam. Now, why did that common friend say that? You want to tell him that you think he did something wrong. Tell him, why did you say what someone else said? But that's the churban of Rechilus. And I think the understanding, the psychology of it is, if you say something behind my back, you betrayed me. You're my friend. Why are you talking? It's like a stab in the back. But whatever the case is, this is human emotion. If you say something about me and I hear about what you said, it bothers me. Whether it's right or wrong is not negeya, but I see this as an ongoing maxriv esa'olam. Actually, it was 2 olamis were destroyed. And the Chafetz Chaim spells this out in Be'er Mayim Chaim, loshonhora Yud Yud Ches, ikatam issur Rechilus kedei shle'yir b'machloikis b'Yisrael. So this is basically the problem. I'll give you another mashal. You tell someone that, I think you're wrong. Varaya, even Pliny was surprised that you did that. And you say the name, not just Pliny, of course. That's Rechilus. You're saying that Pliny told you that he's wrong. So that causes a resentment, and that's Rechilus. You tell a Baal Simcha. I heard this story once. Someone told about Simcha, you know, your good friend is such a masmid. I noticed he came to your chasidim, he showed his face, he danced for half a minute, and he ran out back to learn. He's such a masmid. But the Baal Simcha was not impressed by that. My best friend does that to me. You know, comes in, comes out. So why do people talk without thinking? I don't know, but that's the churban of Machriv Esa'olam. Now, which is worse? Loshonhora or Rechilus? I use that word worse, because somebody, which is better? You know. They're both horrible. Which is more horrible? That's really the question. So the emphasis, the Rambam and Halacha Beis that I mentioned about Machriv Esa'olam, the Yesh Oven Gadol Miza'ad Ma'oid, V'hu B'chlal Lav Zeh, and that's part of Rechilus, V'hu Loshonhora. So the Rambam clearly holds that Rechilus is horrible, but Loshonhora is more horrible, is worse. Come to Ravid, and he says, no, the Rambam is not right, because Rechilus is worse. What's the machlokes Rambam or Ravid? So I think it's pashut. The truth is, both have a negative quality that the other one doesn't have. Loshonhora, the maisa is a maisa maguna. You're saying negative, bad about someone. That's Loshonhora. Diba hamazik. But the tochacha of Rechilus is worse than Loshonhora. Because Loshonhora, you say something bad, Amola does damage, Amola doesn't, but the dibur is the avla. The Rechilus, the tochacha, the mesina, the machlokes is Machriv Esa'olam. The Rambam looked at the Maisa, and the Raiva looked at tochacha. The Radvaz in a teshuva, in the first teshuva in Chelik Hay, he has perhaps a different insight, and he says, the Gemara says that Loshonhora has no hana to the one that says it. So he says, therefore, that's why the Rambam holds that the Loshonhora is worse. Because if you do something without hana, that's a bigger corruption. You did something without hana, so therefore, you did something, no, you have hana, no, a person is weak in a weak moment. But the Rambam held that the fact that Loshonhora is ba'aloi hana, that's what makes it worse than Rechilus. Because Rechilus, you have a benefit. Like, Doeg, he found favor in Shaul's eyes. The Netziv and Emek Sha'ala, She'ilta, Peik Peiches, Yivkatan Chavtes, he quotes this, and he says, maybe the Ravid held that if you do an Aveira, and you have enough from it, that's a big hashchosa. You're doing something to gain, you're doing Hepech Ratzon Hashem for your own personal interest. He quotes a pasuk in Kehelas, Al Tachti Espicha, Lachte Psarecha. He says, don't use an Aveira to gain. So in other words, again, it's which is a bigger corruption? Doing something without hana, doing something to get hana. But again, it's a machlokes, so michumra, we consider both of them terrible. One more point I wanted to mention, now I hope it be very self-understood. What's the source, what's the makar of the issur loshonhora? In other words, Rechilus is obviously Selech Rachel Mamecha. Where do you see the issur of loshonhora? Especially as we said, and we'll see more barichas, that there are two different issurim. So what's the makar of the issur loshonhora? So the emes is the Rambam already explained that. The Rambam says Yesh Oven Gadol Ad Ma'ol Hu B'chlal Zeh. The Rambam holds that loshonhora is included in Loiselach. The Chinuch in Reish Lamed Vav, he says about loshonhora and Rechilus, he puts them together. He says Rechilus and loshonhora shutfoi, and that's shutfim. So that like the Rambam and the Chinuch, loshonhora is included in the issur of Rechilus. The question is like the Rambam, like the Ravid, that Rechilus is worse than loshonhora. So you can't say that loshonhora is included in Rechilus, because Rechilus is worse. Maybe loshonhora is not so. Maybe it's not so awesome. So the emphasis there is another makar mafurish to the issur of loshonhora, and that's the Gemara in Pesachim Kuf Yud Ches. The Gemara darshan the pasuk in Parashat Mishpat in Perek Chav Gimel pasuk Aleph, Loisisa Shem Ashav. Zok the Gemara, why does Loisisa come right after like Helet Hashlicha Noisai? Zok the Gemara, whoever says loshonhora, Roy Lashlicha Leklavim. Now I don't want to touch that, but you just see what loshonhora is all about. Roy Lashlicha Leklavim. Person should become dog food. Rachmana Litzlan. Torah says this, but we see from this Gemara
that the issur loshonhora is loisisa, loisasi shem ashav. So obviously the Rabbi would hold that Rechilus is the issur loiselach. Loshonhora is not as bad, but that's the issur loisisa loisasi. But the emes is the Rambam himself in Hilchas Sanhedrin, Perek Chaval, Halacha Zayin, mentions the issur loshonhora based on the pasuk loisisa. And that's why the Chafetz Chaim in the Psich, when he mentions the Lavim, he seems to imply that there are two makairis for the issur of loshonhora. Loiselach rachel b'amecha and loisisa. You'll say two makairis for one issur? Why do you have to have two psuk of one issur? So the answer I tell you is halavai. It's only two issur in loshonhora. If you remember learning the Psicha, the Chafetz Chaim enumerates 17 lavin and 14 esin for loshonhora. So it's not a kasha only two, but lamaisa it's much more. But the Rabbi said what we have now, and now we can apply this lamaisa. Basically, there are two terrible isurim. The machlokes is showing which is worse, but the fundamental chiluk is loshonhora, is dibur hamazik. It's negative talk. Rechilus is even if good talk. I mean, sometimes it's bad talk as well, but it could even be good talk. But it's something that causes machlokes. Imagine someone's making a chasana, and he tells another yid who gathers a mechutin to his mechutin. They share mechutanim. Our mechutin is so nice. He even volunteered to pay for the flowers and for the band. And then the old mechutin says, "Really? But not when we met. I made a shidduch with him. He gave me such a run for my money." So he said a nice thing. He complimented the mechutin. Very nice. But why don't you think? Do you know for sure? Maybe he did it for you. So it's innocent, positive talk that causes machlokes. That's the problem in Rechilus. Okay. Chafetz Chaim in Aleph Gimel, when I say Tei Chafetz Chaim, I mean Chelik Beis Hilchos Rechilus. He says, even if you try to defend yourself, you say, you give someone mussar. He goes, no, I'm not, I didn't do anything wrong. Oh, really? So you tell him, really? Pliny also said you're wrong. So you're giving someone mussar, and you're trying even to defend yourself, but you're implying that Pliny spoke bad about this person. And the Chafetz Chaim says, even if your kavana, you did something good, and you mean good, but lemaisa don't cause machlekes. And he cites a Mishnah, and that's the plea, it's a Mishnah. In Sanhedrin Chav Tes, the Mishnah says when the Bezdin paskins who's right and wrong, then when they walk out, they shouldn't say that one dayan shouldn't say, I really thought you were right, but I was outvoted. And the Mishnah says you're not allowed to say that, either based on Leiselach Rachel Ba'amecha or Hoylech Rachel Megala Soy. There are two girsais. But for a dayan, an ish tzaddik, an ish emes, who's saying the emes, he's saying, listen, I don't know, I thought you were right, but I was outvoted. Zok the Rambam Pirish Mishnayis, because we have to have dayanim that are huvim eitzel b'nei adam. And if someone is told that the dayan paskin against him, he's going to have tainus. Now the truth is, he shouldn't have tainus, because we have to thank the dayanim for saying the truth. But people are people, and people sometimes are less than perfect, and they're going to have a taina on the dayan, even though it's not justified. But that causes machlokes. But what's even more noteworthy, the Gemara, a little later, Daf Lamed, says, okay, Bezdin Paskin, now they have to keep a record. What should they write? So the first Rabbi Yochanan says, write Zakai. In other words, as if everybody said he's Zakai. Rish Lakish said, no. Pliny Bezakin, and one dayan said Chayiv. A third shita says, Mitoich Devreihem, it came out that Pliny is right. Three shitas, like, what's going on here? Zok the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan said Zakai. You have to say innocent. Why? Because if you're going to say, but one said guilty, like Seilach Rachel Ba'amecha, you're saying that one dayan paskin against him. Rish Lakish said, but if you say Zakai, you're implying that they all said Zakai, and it's lacking emes. You're not allowed to say something that's Mersik Shikra, so you have to say the truth. So Allah says, why don't we do the best thing? Mitoich Divrayim, don't say who said what. It came out Zakai. What is Rabbi Lez's shita? You can satisfy both needs. Don't say who said Zakai and Chayiv, and don't be Mersik Shikra. So to Chafetz Chaim, beautiful. look how careful you have to be not to give any shemetz of a reason to have machlokes. Logic would dictate, you're writing it down, who cares on this, it's done deal. No, people are people. How careful we have to be. Even though Dayanim meant it ehrlich, but again, people are less than perfect. Then the Chafetz Chaim quotes another makar. Again, it's something that we learn about, but we don't realize the lesson. The Gemara says in Shabbos Lamed Gimel, the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said that the Roman government, whatever they do for their own benefits, and they do nothing for us. And the Gemara says Yehuda ben Gerim heard that and said it over. So if you learn superficially, you think Yehuda ben Gerim was a massa and ran to the Roman government. Chas v'shalom. Rashi says he told his Talmidov, there must have been a Rosh Hashiva. Or he told his family. The way I understood it, that one of the Tanoim said the Romans are good. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was a Kanoi. He said, what do you mean they're good? They're not good. He was not politically correct. And Yehuda ben Gerim was proud. My Rebbe, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, he had this Kamaida. And he said as it is. And he told his Talmidim, his family. But he wasn't a Masa Chas v'Shalom. But he got back to the Romans. And he spent 13 years hiding in a cave. And the end, of course, Yehuda ben Gerim, the Gemara says, pardon me, was reduced to a Gal Shel Atzomos. So the Chafetz Chaim, Yehuda ben Gerim didn't do anything wrong. Forget he was proud of what Reb Shimon Bar Yochai had said. But Lamaisa, that was Rechilus. It got to the wrong party and it caused him trouble. It was Ma'ira Machlokes between him and the Romans. Now we always say this, it's so sad when a bad person does something wrong. But what's much more sad is when a good person does something bad by mistake. That was a tragedy Yehuda ben Gerim. The Eitzah, like we always say, like the Paskas and Mishnah, Leiv Tzadik Yegalanis. Think before you talk. Yachshiv v'yavin ma'yana kodim shiyashadav, as Rashi says. You want to say how proud you are about Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, but this is sensitive information. It might get back. The Rambam in Chizdeis says Siyag l'chach mishtika, and he passes like that. Chelik Beis, Perik Beis, halacha hey. So how would you type Siyag l'chach mishtika? Pashi say, don't talk, be a shaskin. Like the Miriamis was a shaskin, Rabbi Chanav Asma was a shaskin, come out, didn't talk. But there's another alternative. The Rambam says lefichach lo yamar lo hashiv. Don't talk without thinking. The Churban is not talking. The Churban is talking without thinking. You want to see how nice the mechutin is? But tell the other mechutin, you don't know how their relationship is. You want to see how nice this masmid is, but it might, he might take it the wrong way. This is the eitzah. Think before you talk, and then you don't say the wrong things. Rabbeinu Yoina in Shar Gimel, Ois Ayin Dalid, he says something very profound and very practical. He says the pasuk says that a person sometimes punished what he says, even if he didn't mean it. Dr. Ben Yaina, why? How could you punish for not meaning it? Is going on loshonhora. Yayanish ala pshia sheba. Afabli shalin iskavan levazo is chaverei. A person said loshonhora and he didn't mean saying bad. So why is he punished? You know why he's punished? Because why do you say that? Why don't you think? And I think the most incredible example of this we just learned not long ago. In the beginning of Parashat Vayera, if you learn Pashat even superficially, you notice there's something wrong. Sarah tells her Rebbeinu Shleim, "V'adayin izaken, we can't have children. My husband is old." The next pasuk, the Rebbeinu Shleim tells Avram that Sarah told me that she's old. V'anizakanti. So the more above Metzia Peizayin, Rashi quotes it, because the Rebbeinu Shleim realized how could he tell Avram that Sarah said V'adayin izaken? In other words, that would be a form of Rechilus. So the Rebbeinu Shleim Kaviyachal 100 times was Mishana from the emes, changed what happened, not to come to a shemetz of Rechilus, because it might come to machlokes. Now you think about it, it's Maval Arayin. The Rebbeinu Shleim is kulei emes, and the Rebbeinu Shleim resorted to something lacking emes. What's the chashash? Avram will hear that my wife said I'm old, and he'll be enraged. Avram Avinu. First of all, he was no younger manchik, not even 9chik. He was 100. There was no youngster. But more than that, you're talking about Avram, who was a Kadosh Elyon Shein Kamoyu, who didn't look at his wife for decades, and how she looked until the Atana Ati yadati, he no yadati ki ishi yafas mariat. Punti had to look one time. What are the chances of him getting angry at his wife? She said she's old. But that's a zahiris in Yachshiv Yovan Ma Yoim Makoyim Shiyadaber. And again, maybe the hesber is, like we said, my wife said that about me, maybe, who knows? But if the Bershtam was Mishana, Kaviyachol, how careful we have to be. The Chavetz Chaim gives another example in Aleph Yud. Someone tells Pliny about a past deed that Almoini did to him, just in conversation. So he's reigniting a machlokes. Why are you doing that? That's Rechilus. He knows about it, yeah, but people, they hear it, it's Cheshvan, it's mistamik v'raloi. Another example, the Chavetz Chaim, which might be a chiluk a little bit, the Chavetz Chaim says in a number of places, if you say loshonhora, even if the other person knows the loshonhora, it's still awesome. Because that's talking, because that's the gufa issur. But the Chavetz Chaim, in Beramayim Chaim Daled Gimel, by Yosef Rechilus, he says if you tell someone something that happened, which might be Rechilus, but 1,000%, now I'm not certain there's ever shaykh, but 1,000% that it won't be Ma'or Machlokes, it's not awesome. What's the Chid loshonhora Rechilus? So Videreno is very good. Loshonhora is the dibur that's awesome. The dibur is talking begnus Yisrael. That's the issur, the negative talk. So even if it doesn't bring machlokes, that's the gufa issur. But Rechilus, the issur is the sinner, and machlokes it causes. And if this won't cause sinner machlokes, then there's no reason to ask. Now again, usually it brings out machlokes a little bit more. In fact, the Chavetz Chaim in Beramayim Chaim Tes proves that from the fact that when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke about Dasan V'Aviram, you look in the more Ma'it Katan Tezayin, that might have been a possible Rechilus, even though there's already a sinner between the two, but Ma'ira more sinner is still awesome. So it's always a chash gadol that a little more sinner, a little more of a machlokes. But I guess theoretically we could say this is an afkamina, that if there's no shemetz of machlokes or sinner, so loshonhora still would be awesome, but not Rechilus. What's the teshuva when someone Nebuch was nichshal in Rechilus? So this is very, very challenging. Because if a person said loshonhora and no damage was done, so the Chavetz Chaim says basically it's mein adam l'makam. You have to say al heter or slach lanu. But if a person did Rechilus, there was ma'ira sin or machlokes, he has to go and undo that. How do you undo that? That's a very, very good question. If he told someone something and he let him run back and say, first of all, be moichemi that I told you that's narishkeit. I was machzor you in makabel Rechilus. Don't tell anybody. It shouldn't go beyond you. So at least you stop the damage there. But let's say he already told the other person. Now he has to work to undo the damage. He has to become a mediator and bring out the problem and solve the problem. So it's a lot easier, trust me, not to talk loshonhora or Rechilus. But if he did damage, he has to undo the damage. That's part of the avla of Rechilus. The Chavetz Chaim in Beramayim Chaim Vav Zayin, he says, his lashon is efsha, it's mutter to makabel Rechilus on a rasha. Now it's noteworthy because in Hilchas Loshonhora Yud Zayin Hey, he says it's mutter to talk loshonhora on a rasha. And here he used the lashon of efsha. So I saw the Heintige Mefarshim on Chavetz Chaim wonder why here he writes Peshor and here he writes efsha. So the simple teretz they say is the Chavetz Chaim's derech was that whenever he had halacha, they didn't have a raya, he wrote efsha. And here he had no raya that Rechilus is mutter for rasha. But the emes is that it's very mistaver that's taka mutter 100%, maybe even more so, because if the yisoid of Rechilus is causing sin and machlokes, if someone is taka terdik rasha, takert oyev Hashem sinura. You're supposed to hate Rishayim. David HaMelech said, Tacha sinas hanesim. So if this is Taka someone who qualifies to be a Rasha, fakert, make that rift, make that division. Adarabah. It in a small sense is more of a heter Rechilus than loshonhora. The Chavetz Chaim says this twice, in Hilchas loshonhora, Beis Yud Beis, and also by Yos and Aleph in Hagah and Beramayim Chaim Sivkot and Dalet. If someone's haltzach hagroisem even, quote unquote, And he goes to hear a drasha just to share his mevinus, just to share his, narishkeit. So the Chavetz Chaim says he's over on going to the drasha without even talking yet. Because here the Torah says, Lo yiseilech rachel b'amecha. So the issur is going. So the Chavetz Chaim says that this is the gufa issur is different than the loshonhora. So obviously, when a person has mevinus, let him use it in the right way. But to go and hear vasas, and again, this is something, unfortunately, maybe it should be mentioned more, but it's not my place. Some people, that's their yichus. They know all the latest schmutz, and they catch everybody. Oh, do you know what's going on? They captivate audiences around the world. That's the lowest existence possible. You're feeding people with loshonhora, with Rechilus. But that's the issur of loiseilach. The halicha itself is us. The Chavetz Chaim writes this clearly. Never asks, no, what did they say about me? What did they say about my davening for the Yomid? He thinks he's going to get the greatest, But, he doesn't know that behind their back, who knows what they're talking. You're looking for trouble, asking me what they say about me. What's the tochacha? Rambam would always say, he said, after a halachic avodah in Rosh Hashanah davening, there's always a danger spot. This was exact lashon. People go home after davening, we're going with friends or with their spouse. No, how'd you like the Rav's drasha? That's Rishon Cheshvan avoinus. There you go. What are you looking for trouble? How you like the davening? But I think it's nothing to do with Rosh Hashanah per se. Whenever you ask, how do you like this or that, or whatever it is, you're inviting trouble. Chavetz Chaim gives another example of Rechilus in Gimel. He says, you tell someone what they said about his father, or his mother, or his son. Now you're not telling them what they said about him, but it's the same problem. If I hear what they say about my son, it gets me angry. So telling me about my close relatives is also all ma'oyer machlokes. So not that saying what they said about me. A person feels betrayed when you talk about his family. The Chavetz Chaim in Zayin Aleph gives another example. You tell someone, boy, I was watching today, your son was fighting with the other person's son. Boy, your son got such a beating. Think, what are you doing? What happens, Chavetz Chaim says, and we see this in real life, he goes back to that son and hits the other son, and the son goes crying to his father, and now, like the Welt says very correctly, the boys are playing the next day. They don't care. The fathers are fighting on the Chemes Mitzvah. At Seif Yimeim. The sons got into a little fight, but they forget about it. The fathers are, they still fight years later. You have to use seichel. Chavetz Chaim in Tesvav gives another mashal in business. Someone was thinking of selling it to somebody. And he even said, fine, but you bring money, we'll talk about it. Someone else came along with a lucrative offer, and he gave it to the other person. Comes back the first Moicha, who was preempted, and he said, no, I tell you the truth, I was going to do it, I was going to sell it to you, but he forced me, he pushed me, he begged me, shift the blame. Now, if it's true, so it's still Rechilus. And if it's your fault and you're shifting the blame, it's tam sheker, it's tam an avla. But even if it's true, the other person did wrong and forced you to sell it to him. Chavetz Chaim said, but that's Rechilus. You're making a machlokes. You're telling him that he grabbed the item. Another thing, you tell someone, you go, he advised me to contact you to help. Now, if the other person's a Baal Chesed and he's happy that people are sending him customers, wonderful. As I darf sein, just like if I refer you to a new customer, you're overjoyed. If I send you a Chesed case, a new customer for Chesed, you should be happy. But people are sometimes people. And as the Gemara says in Erech and Daf Tez Zayin, sometimes if you say how good someone is and people hear that and run to him and they wear him out, that might be, like the Pasuk says, Mevorach Re'ehu B'kol Gadol, Ba'boika Hashkem, Klal Techashav Loi. So sometimes, again, halavai, in the ideal world, if you send someone a tzedakah case, a chesed case, he should be overjoyed. I have more business in this world, another chesed. But some people, they look at it, why did he say, I did him a favor, why is he spreading to someone else? So, and that's taka Rechilus, I heard this story, someone once asked a Gevir for money, and he gave him $100. So he says, but you gave my friend $500. A blatant Rechilus. Imagine what the Gevir thinks. I gave the first Meshulach $500. So not only he's not nice to me, he sends someone after and tells him what I gave him. Person, maybe the Meshulach was collecting without a commission. He doesn't make any money. I'm down like schus. and he needs the money for someone else. But how do you do that? You know, the Gevir is betrayed, and the first Meshulach is betrayed, and everybody's unhappy. But darf trachten. Simple cases, but a person doesn't think. I'll give you another case. And again, I don't like to use the word Reuven and Shimon and Levi because people forget who Reuven and Shimon and Levi. I'll be very clear. Mesaper, was the one that's saying, told Mekabel what the victim did to him, the Mekabel. So that's Rechilus, right? Mesaper told Mekabel what the victim did to the Mekabel. Now the Mekabel's all angry, what he hears, and he goes back to the victim. Why do you say that? Why do you do that to me? Why do you say that to me? So the Chafetz Chaim in Gimel Beis, that's a double Rechilus. When the Mesaper told Mekabel what the victim said, that's Rechilus. You're inciting the victim against the Mekabel. Now the Mekabel goes back to the victim. Why did you say that? How do you know that? Because Mesaper said it. So that's double Rechilus. Double your money, right? Double avla. People don't think. So to Chafetz Chaim, even if you don't say, I heard you said this about me. How'd you hear? There's only one person that knows. So you don't have to spell it out, Rachel bitcha katana. If it's obvious who told you, that's Rechilus. Another example. A mother tells a child, please do this. And punk today, the child did it. The father comes home and he says, who did this? Who did this? And the boy says, Mommy told me to do it. So in the Beis Lechem Yehud, that's one of the Mefarshim on the page here, there, Reish Mem Yud Sif Yud, he says, if a child does that, he's Ayvan Kibbutz, because the father will get angry at the mother. So Rapam Zechon Levarach and Atar Lamelech and Abba Tzadik Dalet asked the question, it's only a Kibbutz? Isn't that Rechilus? You're saying, Mommy told you to do it, the father be angry about. So Rapam said, Echanami, the two issur. Now, the question is, what should the son do? So, if he's a good son, he'll say, I'm sorry I did it, I thought you'd appreciate it. And father gets angry, no, he'll take the blame. If the mother is considerate, she'll say, no, don't hit him, I did it. Don't hit me either, but, it's my idea. But here we come to an unbelievable issue, and this is a share for itself, but the Chafetz Chaim in the end of Hilchos loshonhora, based on the Gemara, Mavaldika insight, that if someone did not do something, and they think he did it, it's his fault, he shouldn't say, I didn't do it, he did it. That's wrong. And even if he say, I didn't do it, and it's obvious who did it, maybe it's also wrong, because it's obvious that he did it. And the Mishnah, the Gemara, and the Chafetz Chaim quotes this all, it might be kedai to take the blame, I did it, I'm sorry, but not to implicate someone else. Even though you didn't do it. You're talking about Tanoim that did this, Ayin Sham V'Timtza. So that's a different sugya, but basically, it's not simply, well, I didn't do it, it's his fault. That's zichasa. And that's this concept of Rechilus. Someone asks you, he shows you his new purchase, what do you say to my bargain? And you're surprised, bargain? Not a bargain, regular price, maybe overpriced, maybe the suit doesn't fit well. So the Chafetz Chaim says, the person impulsively say, what? He ripped you off, go back to him and say, I want to return the item. Said the Chafetz Chaim, wait a second. And this is in Tes Yud Gimel, Sit Cotton Gimel. If it's not a done deal, he was just allowed to show it to someone, or even if it was a deal, but it's taka oino, there was some dishonest dealings, you have a right to say, listen, it's not a good fit, it's not a good sale, it's not a good price. But if it was a mekach kayam, it's not a oino. He could have done better elsewhere, but it's lamaisa, there's no way you're allowed to reverse the mechira. By telling this person, what do you get? This is not a bargain, I'm surprised at the one that sold it. That is, the Chafetz Chaim says, not just Rechilus. That starts a chain of events that he's going to first get angry at the Moicha. Then he goes back to the Moicha and throws it, I'm not taking this, keep the item, and then I'm tearing up the check. Whatever he'll do. And the Chafetz Chaim says, before long, he turns out doing a whole group of Averis, all because of this person's thoughtless response. Now, what do? You do like Beis Hillel says. If someone bought something and he can't return it, say Kala Nova Chasuda. Now, don't say Kala Nova Chasuda about a suit. But you understand, like Beis Hillel explains, if he chose this suit, he likes this suit, so it's nice for him. You don't have to like it. But if he chose it and he bought it and he paid that price, so now for him it's good. But to incite the person is basically an effort and futility that only brings Averis. A person sitting by a chasana and someone said a loshonhora barabim about Pliny. Can he go back to Pliny and say, you know, I just heard a whole shekoli about you. Someone said barabim about what you did wrong. So, of course, that's Rechilus. But I must mention, but this is really a different shir, but I have to mention at least, what about the heter apitlasa? The person said loshonhora, like I said, b'fnei am v'eda. So could I go and say, you know, by the way, someone's bashmutzing you, he said by a chassan in front of 10 people, bad about you. So that sounds like apitlasa. But when you learn the sugya, which is and was a shir by itself, the heter apitlasa is a very limited heter. And the Chavetz Chaim Bayos in Beis Gimel, or more bariches in loshonhora Beis Yud, he says, after I explained the sugya, re'ei acha kam yesh l'srachi mikula zeh, shekamat ein lo mokam b'metzius. Kamat is no such heter. The only heter would be you say something that perhaps could be interpreted two ways, and he said about Beitlasa, so then you could say he meant good. But if blatant loshonhora was said barabim, that doesn't justify saying the person that's talking about you, even though that sounds like Beitlasa, but that's not the sugya. Or as the Chavetz Chaim says, when someone's moicha, that's sugya bava basra, he's moicha about a field that someone's stealing, so that's tochacha. Tochacha is mutter. But basically, if you heard something b'apeitlasa, that's not a heter to go and spread that weiter. That would be Rechilus, and that's not the general heter of apeitlasa. It's a better idea to go to the speaker and says, "Why are you talking loshonhora?" And worse yet, barabim. Let people know that there's zero tolerance to loshonhora in our times. A question where it comes up in many forms, so take it to your particular needs. It could be in a yeshiva, a moisid, a business, a family setting. There's a question what to do. Should we expel the Talmud? Should we hire another worker? Should a family the treatment for the father? What should they do? Many different shares. You have to have a vote. And there's a vote. And then a person wants to say, you know, I really was against everybody else and no one listened to me. And he wants to tell the affected party, the marshal. There was a question, should they take a boy into yeshiva? And he was very for, should take him into yeshiva. But Lamaisa, he was outvoted. So the mechanech that wanted to take the boy cannot say, you know, I don't know why they didn't take your son. I voted that you take him. That's mamash our Mishnah Sanhedrin. You know, in a business, should we hire this worker? I said they should hire you. I don't know why I didn't hire you. All these things are a basic violation of a Mishnah. In fact, the Oirach Mishpat, Mechayshim Mishpat, Simon Yutes says, even a paisik. Let's say somebody asks a paisik a shayla. So he says, okay, I'll get back to you. And he looks into it, and he tells the shayl, you should know, I thought that the food was kosher, but another Rav told me it's treif, so I'm listening to that Rav. That also might be this Mishnah. You're shifting the blame to another person. Now, if the other person doesn't care, you know, the Rav says treif, fine with me. But if it causes resentment to that Rav that was, quote, being machmir, that's our Mishnah of Rechilus. Someone asks you point blank, what did he say about me? And you don't want to tell him what he said about him. What do? So to say, I don't want to talk, plead the fifth. So that makes it worse. You don't want to say, oh, see, yes, I know. So here, if you can't, squeeze out of it any other way, you do what the Baruch Shalom did, and what the Gemara says in two places, in Yavamis Samachei, Amid Beis, and Bamitzia Peizayin. The Gemara in Yavamis even more than Bamitzia that we mentioned earlier. Either mutter or mitzvah to l'shanais v'neidak shalom. A person has to get up and say, he said nothing bad about you. We're talking about something totally different. And say it with a convincing tone of voice. How are you allowed to lie? You're not allowed to lie. But in this case, that's emes. The Baruch Shalom was teaching us that emes and sheka is subjective. When Yaakov had to lie, Kaviyachol, when he had to lie, that was the biggest emes. And that's why Yaakov was the must of emes. He knew when to say emes, when to say sheka. And Yaakov was like Rabbi Kamenetsky once said, Avram and Yitzchak, their defining moment was the Akedah. What was Akedas Yaakov? When he had to lie, Lamana emes, Lamana shalom, whatever the case is. So tak is traumatic for a yid to lie. It's mamish a traumatic situation, but he has to do it. So to get out of that situation, he has to, if need be, have to lie. But the Chofetz Chaim points out it's so wrong to ask someone, what did he say about me? And the Chofetz Chaim is in hey, how many averas come out of this question? Let's say somebody asks you, did the boss give you a raise? Because I didn't get a raise, and you got a raise. What do you do? So if you say something like this, why should I get a raise? And he'll go for that. So then you avoided lying. But if that is not going to go, you say, I didn't get a raise. And remember, that's emes in this situation. Because the other choice is machlokes. And now we can say, achrein hichbid, I think the most challenging of today is the following. Masapa told you, you're the makabel, that victim did something wrong, and he wants you to give victim musa. Which you could do it, because you're friendly with victim. But the only way you know about this avla is because of Masapa. So when you, Makabel, gives victim Musa, he said, I can't believe it. Masapa told you, because otherwise you would know. So everybody means Hashem Shemayim 100%, but it comes out of Rechilus that Masapa told Makabel something about victim. In other words, is there a heter of Rechilus l'tochacha like there is by loshonhora l'tochacha? You're allowed to, if somebody asks you about the shidduch and you know some negative information, you're allowed to say it. And like we explained many times, loshonhora tochacha is a misnomer. It's not loshonhora with tochacha. It's not loshonhora. Maybe Rechilus also. But the emes is a big chiluk. Because loshonhora, the gufa is dibur hamazik. And if it's tochacha, it's dibur hamatzel. So it's not the gufa issur. But Rechilus is not bad talk. It's important talk. But the issur, the machlokes that comes out of it. So let's analyze our case. The mekabel wants to give musa to victim, a big mitzvah, lechayach techiach. But he's also causing machlokes between victim and masaper. So who said the machlokes is justified by doing the mitzvah? And might be a shtickle lead, and this is also a mitzvah lefarsim, in Ber Maim Chayim, Tesiv Cotton Hay, the Chofetz Chaim has the following shayla, which unfortunately is common. Someone asks you shidduch or hiring information, and you must tell him loshonhora tochacha. There's no shayla about it. But you know he's not a very discreet person, and you're going to tell him the negative information. It's going to get right back to the person that you said about the negative information. In other words, you're going to give justifiable information, but it ends up being Rechilus. So the Chofetz Chaim paskins, you're not allowed to give that information. It's going to get back and make Rechilus machlokes. So you see, l'chayra, that there is no heter of Rechilus or tochacha. But that's not a raya. Because there, you have to give information. The fact that it gets back to someone else has no bearing on your information. But here, the only way to do it is if you tell someone to give someone musa. So it's a plea I did not find in any of the earlier poskim, even in the Chofetz Chaim, I didn't find kamat. But I found the chinuch. I mean, the chinuch is obvious. In Reish Lamed Vav, which is issur Rechilus, he says how bad it is. Elim kein kavanaseinu l'salek nizakin u'lahash bisriv. The issur is very bad unless your kavanah is l'toiva l'tochacha. So the chinuch is talking primarily about Rechilus, and he throws in this makar of tochacha. Could be the svara is, in a certain sense, that the truth is, every loshonhora tochacha causes a tsar, an agmas nefesh. He's not hired for the job. The shidduch doesn't work out. The teretz is, if that's the way it has to be, that's the way it has to be. You have to do yours. There's always a collateral damage, so to speak. So why don't we say also, if you're giving over information that's to make machlokes, that's Rechilus. Even without kavan to make machlokes is Rechilus. If your kavan is 100% l'shem shamayim, and the machlokes is unavoidable, you have to do yours. What comes out, that's collateral damage. And the emphasis I found, what I think is a pretty clear raya, the famous story of Ma'it Cotton Tez Zayin, where Reb Shimon, the son of Rabbi, was learning about kapara, and they came to an impasse, a shvera sugya. So Reb Shimon said, let's ask Rabbi, my father, he knows it all. Bar Kapara says, no one knows this. Like Rabbi is not going to help here. And as Rashi says, next time Shimon met his father Rebbe, he said, like in B'Tumai, well, Bar Kapara says you couldn't figure this one out. And the Gemara says that Rebbe had a kpeda. And Taka, he told Bar Kapara how unhappy he was. So Chofetz Chaim said, why did Reb Shimon go and tell his father what Bar Kapara said, so that's not a kasha, because Rashi says, Lefi Tuma, it wasn't out to be Masapa. But what was the heter for Rebbe to act on that Rechilus? He turns Bar Kapara, what did you say? The Teretz, since he wanted to give Bar Kapara Musa, and he felt that it was necessary, he was allowed to tell him, even though it ended up reflecting on Reb Shimon's Rechilus. So I think that's a pretty good raya. Either machlokes comes out, so either hopefully you'll try to tell him, listen, the other person told me, but he meant l'shem shemayim, and don't get angry, or try to work it out. But this seems to be the emes. So it applies to a few cases. We had this shayla, someone noticed that his next door neighbor's babysitter was not doing the job. She was on the phone on the porch, the kids were inside, and there were a few children. Could he tell the mother that the babysitter's not doing her job? So the emes is the best thing would be tell the mother, come home and catch her in the act. So this way, there's no way of snitching. Or the mother should say, people are talking that you're outside on the porch. But even if Lamaisa, by saying someone told me, and it's clear that it was the neighbor, I saw Reb Shlomo Zalman's psak, it's mutter. Because this would be Rechilus, the Teyelis. Someone asked me this, someone told him, I'm so upset, Pliny didn't invite me to his chasana. So he said, oh, really? Okay, don't worry. Usually you always complain, why people invite me to the chasana, they want me to go, I have no time. Why are you angry? But the Rabbi says, no, I'm insulted, he didn't invite me. Could he go back to Pliny and tell him what's going on? So this is tricky, because if he tells Pliny that the other fellows is fuming why you didn't invite him, so that's Rechilus, right? But then again, I told, listen, the way it is now, it's machlokes anyhow. So tell the Baal Simcha, call up this Pliny and say, Pliny, I didn't get your return card. So guys, what do you mean? I didn't get your invitation. Really? Well, are you coming or not? Now, that's Gnevas Das, that's sneaky. But the Mokim Shalom, if Sheker is mutter, so Gnevas Das is also. So if you could get out of it without making a whole gedilla, that would be perfectly mutter. Someone is mistreating his spouse or his boss. Can you go straight to them and say, listen, I hear what's going on, it's not right? So that is l'tayeles, but it's Rechilus. How do you hear if not from the spouse or from the worker? So again, if you can mention in a way that people are talking, when people hear that they get very nervous. People are talking, wow. But basically, if you 100% certain, you're talking about a chayshim mishpedish, you're telling someone he's doing wrong to his worker, he should pay more, you have to make sure you're right. But if you're 100% certain there's an avla going on, the best thing would be to say, people are talking, because people get very, frightened by that, and he'll respond accordingly. Don't mention who you heard it from. Slip an anonymous note into his talazekel, what you're doing is not right. But if need be, laman ha'emes, if there's an avla going on, you have to do what you have to do. If he'll react negatively, that's his problem. Someone asks, who broke my item? Who used my item? And you know who did it. So you have a chiv samad amriyecha to make sure that he pays for the broken item. But you have to tell him, I know who broke your item. That's Rechilus. Go to the mazik and say, if you don't take care of this within 24 hours, I'm going to tell who you did it. Or if you don't stop using his item, I'll tell him who did it. Let him take care of it. And he'll send a check in on him, like cash, whatever it is. But if a little bit seichel, you could do it right. Someone needs musa, again, tell him in this way. Tell him that you should know that people are talking what you're doing, and it won't be clear where it's coming from. But certainly, achrein hichbid of the achrein hichbid is when you know something in confidence, can you give it over when there's a teyelis? So the emes is, this is a basic yisoid of Yiddishkeit. Yuma daf dalad amud beis. The Gemara says, contrary to public opinion, that you're allowed to say everything you know, it's punt fakert. Unless the person says you could tell other people, then you're not allowed to say anything. Because we are people not nishtan behaltvart, mehitvart. Bal toimer is Gemara and Yuma Daf Daled. You learn from the Brainstorm. You don't say things unless they were told that you could tell over. But even worse is when a person discloses confidential information. The Chavetz Chaim in the end of Klal Ches, he says, Yesh begilu soid nezek leba'olav, and that's the issur of Holoch Rachel Megala soid. And the Chavetz Chaim says that's much worse than even avak loshonhora. A yid has to be moist and nefesh to keep a side. This is something that one of the kiyumei ha'olam is keeping soides that were told in confidence. Rav Sadaman said it's poshet kipshutai. If someone told you something in confidence and someone asks you, I want to know that secret, it's important to me. Do you know the truth about the yes or no? You're allowed to say, no, I don't know the truth, so you don't bother you. because you're not letting him Megala side. But at the end of the day, if there's a real tochacha that can't be achieved in any other way, like someone told you he has problems, he wants to do a bad avera, he has emotional issues, and there's no way anybody will find out, that has to find out, only if you're Megala side. So the Paiskim would say, if there's no other choice, you're allowed to Megala side. Because you look in the Goyin, in Mishlei, on that pasuk, Holech Racham Megala side, the Goyin spells out, Kloim ha-Megala side, hu doima l'hoylech rachel v'avaynam shava. Megala side is a subset of Rechilus. And since, as we proved, there's a heter, b'shasatcha gadol, of Rechilus b'mokoim, of Tayalas Gedoyla, so hoylech rachel, again, after asking a shelas chacham, some very confidential, some very important information. If there's no other way of avoiding it, there would be a heter, in this case of Tayalas. I got to talk to you.
I'd like to thank Rabbi Smith for the wonderful shir. Rabbi said the new schedule of the shurim the next 4 weeks is on the bima, and we have everyday shurim. Yetishim, the schedule is the back of his message. If you want to sponsor a shir, please call Eigen Shir Torah at 718-851-8651. Avcham lekashem merot kushboch al zako is it Yisrael fegehibram to mitzvahs. Shenem an rechofas man sitka yagdil Torah v'yadeh.